Okay, let's just jump right into this. Imagine it's 1914, World War I kicks off, and millions of men across Britain and the U.S. just leave.
Right. They leave their jobs, their homes, they're going to fight, and they left behind this massive hole in the workforce.
We're talking factory floors, farms, banks, everything just emptied out.
And that created an immediate crisis.
Mm.
We focus on the battles, but the home front was on the brink of economic collapse.
If you can't build ships or make ammunition, how do you even fight the war?
You can't. The governments realized this almost instantly. The entire war effort was going to fail if they didn't find a solution, and fast.
And that solution was, for the time, pretty radical.
Completely radical. They turned to women and started actively recruiting them for jobs that were always considered men's work.
It wasn't really a choice, was it? It was a necessity.
It was about national survival, and it shattered all these traditional rules about gender roles basically overnight.
So let's start with the most dangerous jobs. I mean, the absolute front line of the home front.
That would have to be the munitions factories.
Right. Making the shells, the explosives, the stuff of war.
Exactly. These women were filling metal shell casings with gunpowder, assembling these really complex fuses. It was incredibly precise, dangerous work.
And the conditions sound just awful.
Oh, brutal. 12-hour shifts were normal,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes longer. The factories were hot, incredibly noisy, just packed with people and machinery. Accidents were happening all the time.
And there was always the risk of a massive explosion.
Always. But there was another danger, a slower one, that gave these women a very specific nickname.
The Canary Girls.
Yeah, the Canary Girls. It's a striking name,
Mhm.
but the reality behind it is horrifying.
It's because of the chemicals, right?
Just because of the TNT they were working with. Constant exposure to the toxic compounds would literally stain their skin and hair a bright, sickly yellow.
Bright yellow.
Bright yellow. It was a sign of severe liver damage from the toxins.
Wow. But the pay was better than what they could get before, right?
That's the crucial trade-off. It was often triple what a woman could earn as, say, a domestic servant. But it was still much less than a man would have been paid for the exact same job.
So they were trading their health for a wage that still wasn't equal.
It was an impossible choice. Risk being poisoned for a chance at some economic stability.
So while one group of women was fueling the war, another was trying to prevent starvation.
Absolutely. The food supply was the next huge crisis. You have naval blockades stopping imports, and you have all the farmers away at war. The fields were empty.
Enter the Women's Land Army, the WLA.
Right. And they recruited thousands of women, many from cities who, had probably never been on a farm in their lives.
So you have former shop clerks learning how to plow fields.
Exactly. Learning how to plow with heavy horses, harvest grain, manage livestock. It's incredibly difficult physical work.
And that kind of work requires practical clothing. This is where the uniform becomes a big deal.
A huge social deal. The WLA workers wore tunics and, importantly, trousers.
Which was scandalous for the time.
Oh, yeah. Seeing a woman in trousers was shocking to many. But you can't work on a farm in a corset and a long skirt. Necessity just won out.
And they eventually earned the respect of the old-school farmers, didn't they?
They did. Their hard work and, their sheer grit really proved what they were capable of.
Okay, so from the farms, let's go back to the cities. Because without workers, they would have just shut down.
Completely. And women stepped in to keep everything moving.
Like literally moving. They started driving buses and trams.
Yeah, maneuvering these huge, heavy vehicles through city streets. That image alone, a woman in that kind of official public role, was revolutionary.
And it wasn't just transportation. They were postal workers delivering mail.
In some places, they became the very first female police officers. They were working in power stations, making sure the electricity stayed on.
So when you saw a woman in a uniform, it just changed your perception of what was possible.
It did. It became impossible to argue that women weren't capable when you were relying on them for your daily life to even function.
And beyond the public services, there was this mountain of paperwork the war created.
A bureaucratic explosion. Military records, supply chains, government contracts, it all needed to be managed.
And that created a boom in clerical work.
A huge boom. Tens of thousands of women were hired as clerks and typists. They really became the backbone of the war administration. This is when the modern office with typewriters and filing systems really takes off, and it's powered by women.
And it spilled over into the private sector too, right? Banks, insurance companies.
Yes. As men were drafted, women took their places, handling accounts, managing money. It was the beginning of women becoming a permanent fixture in the professional workforce.
Okay, so let's shift to the medical side of things. This required a whole different kind of bravery.
An incredible emotional resilience. Many women volunteered as nurses with groups like the VADs, the Voluntary Aid Detachment.
And they weren't in safe hospitals back home, they were near the front lines.
Right, in military hospitals in France, sometimes shockingly close to the actual fighting, you could hear the artillery fire constantly.
I can't even imagine treating the most horrific injuries, shrapnel wounds, gas attacks.
It was relentless and emotionally exhausting, working around the clock with almost no sleep, surrounded by trauma.
And some were driving ambulances right into the danger zones to pick up the wounded.
Yes, showing a different kind of frontline courage.
Yeah.
It was extraordinary work.
And that physical strength we talked about with the land army, it also showed up in places you would never expect.
Heavy industry. Places that seemed impossible for women to enter before the war.
Like shipyards and steel mills.
Exactly. Women learned to weld, to operate giant cranes moving tons of steel. They were building parts for warships.
And in aircraft factories, too.
Assembling wings, building engines for fighter planes. They were using heavy drills and hammers, shaping metal for tanks and trucks.
Management must have been stunned.
They were. They were often astonished at how quickly the women mastered these really difficult mechanical skills.
And at the same time, a whole other army of women was clothing the soldiers.
Right, the textile factories. They were running nonstop, sewing thousands of uniforms, booths, and blankets, all under these immense military deadlines.
So we've established they're doing the same jobs, sometimes even more dangerous jobs. But the pay. Let's go back to the pay.
The wage struggle is central to this whole story. Despite proving they could do the work, they were consistently paid less.
How much less?
On average, maybe 60 or 70% of what a man would earn for the same job. The justification was always that they were just temporary replacements.
Which led to a breaking point.
It did. A really important moment in 1918. The female bus and tram workers in London went on strike.
And what were they demanding?
Equal pay.
Yeah.
Specifically the same war bonus the men were getting.
Go.
It was a direct challenge to the whole system.
And the government had to listen because they couldn't have the whole city's transport shut down.
Exactly. The strike proved that because their labor was now essential, they had real power.
And that new power wasn't just economic, it was social. It changed their whole way of life.
Earning their own money gave them a sense of independence they'd never had. Young women were moving away from home, living in hostels near the factories.
Gaining a new kind of freedom.
A huge amount of freedom. They started socializing more, their fashion changed to be more practical, shorter skirts, shorter hair. The war was like a social accelerator.
Which leads to the big question. What happened when the war ended and the men came home?
It was a brutal reversal. The government and employers basically pushed women out of their jobs to make way for the returning soldiers.
Oh, they were just fired?
Many were. Fired or pressured to resign. The message was, thank you for your service, now please return to the home. The high-paying industrial jobs were once again reserved for men.
That must have been devastating, to have that independence and then have it taken away.
It was. But you couldn't erase what had happened. You couldn't unprove what women had shown they were capable of. The expectations for the next generation were forever changed.
And that leads to the biggest change of all, the political one.
Voting rights.
It seems so obvious now. How could you deny the vote to people who had literally saved the country?
Politicians couldn't. It became an impossible argument to make. The wartime contribution was undeniable.
So the change came quickly after the war.
Very quickly. In 1918, Britain passed a law giving some women over 30 the right to vote. The U.S. followed with the 19th Amendment, giving all women the vote.
And that was a direct result of their work during the war.
A direct result. They earned that right through their labor, their sacrifice, and their sheer competence in every single sector of the economy.
So World War I forced women to take on these incredible responsibilities, proving they were capable of any job, and that fundamentally changed the political landscape forever.
Good luck with your studies.